Back here with Coach Mangini. All right, Coach, things are getting interesting in Pittsburgh. Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin addressed the media yesterday. A room full of inquiring minds asking about what in the world is happening with Antonio Brown. Did he ask to be traded? Reports are that he did. Tomlin said yesterday he didn't. A lot of he said from this story. Here's more now from head coach Mike Tomlin.
Obviously, we take his lack of communication, his lack of presence, particularly on Saturday prior to the game, to be something that's very significant and will be handled appropriately. So I'm not going to speculate on trades and things of that nature. We haven't formally received a request in that regard. So I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to speculate in terms of where the discipline might go and things of that nature. Just know that it's going to be addressed, and it will be addressed and needs to be addressed for obvious reasons. When we're talking about our darkest hour, okay, we're talking about playing to win a game and needing other dominoes to fall for us to be in the tournament, and the guy not communicating, that is a real element of discussion.
Does it reach a point where it becomes more problematic than it's useful?
Certainly.
Coach, he sounds upset. He sounds like not the Mike Tomlin that we're sometimes used to, where he sweeps everything under the rug and things aren't a big deal. He sounds like this is a big deal.
Well, it's upsetting. How could it not be upsetting? You have one of your best players who not only doesn't show up, but doesn't communicate, and you are playing for your playoff life and for the division, and that's a hard thing. Now, that being said, you know what you're getting into. Most of the time, you sign a contract extension. You're not tricked by people's
Sometimes in free agency, you can have some excuses.
Actually,
because you miss a little bit.
If they're not in the building and you don't have that firsthand knowledge, yeah, you can be fooled occasionally there. But this is a player that was in the building, and I'm sure there's probably way more to this story than what we're seeing right now. And if you want to live in that world and you're gonna commit big money to players that can be unpredictable at times, then you better be ready to live with unpredictability. And that's the world that the Steelers have lived in for a long time, and it's paid off for them quite a bit. It's not the world that I was from. It's not necessarily the world that I believe in, but other people have found a way to make that work. Now, that being said, you own what happens when it happens, because you went into it with your eyes wide open.
But even by Steelers standards, this is an extreme circumstance. You guys both, Chris and you, Coach, talk about how the public doesn't understand how many, for lack of a better term, crazy guys are in an NFL locker room, and how many things happen in the locker room that is just maybe the general public would be shocked by, but for you guys, it's just kind of just part of going to a very unique office, right? And so, and we were talking off the air about a guy who you just didn't know on any given day what guy you were getting as far as in the meeting room, as far as what his general demeanor was. That's one thing, and every team's got to deal with that. It's another thing when a guy goes AWOL. Like, that is not typical. That is not, there aren't a litany of examples of guys in what is essentially a playoff week of Antonio Brown's stature, or of anyone's stature, not showing up for a couple days, and then the agent calls the coach day of the game, hey, my guy's going to play. Like, even by the Steelers' standard of it's a different family with different relationships, this is an extreme enough circumstance where what would typically be our year-end press conference where we're addressing everything, they had a press conference where Tomlin was asked midway through the press conference a question about the middle linebacker position, and he flatly said, listen, we'll address all that later. We are here to address a particular circumstance, and it's the future of Antonio Brown and the recent history of Antonio Brown. And I just feel like Tomlin was put in an impossible spot where he had no choice but to not play AB on Sunday, right? We all agree? There was no chance he could say, okay, when Rosenhaus texts him, all right, good, he'll be active. So he is put in a position where he can't play a guy. We saw what happened to their offense without him. Juju had a great year, but all of a sudden when Juju was getting AB's coverage, that offense grinded to a halt.
What would have happened, though, if they lost that game and the Ravens lost, and he didn't play?
Right.
There would be a bunch of people saying, how could you not play Antonio Brown? How could you possibly put the rest of the organization and the rest of the team at such a disadvantage and not play that guy? But what I'm saying is, if they had lost that game and the Ravens had lost and the Steelers were out, or you know, however it would have worked out.
Exactly right. That if the Steelers would have, if Baker had pulled off the upset and the Steelers had lost, so they would have been in with a win, and they lose 13-10 because they can't. Exactly. What is the narrative?
The world would be crying about why didn't he play? How could you let this minor infraction or this misunderstanding push you out of the playoffs? And these things happen, and these things happen way more than is brought out publicly. And you know, at this point, they've got a whole off season to figure it out before they start the regular season.
Football players are like kids, and kids will push you as far as they feel like they can get away with as far as their parents. Now, Nick, you said that they put Mike Tomlin in a
impossible position.
Well, Mike Tomlin, in the way that he has led the team, allowed this to happen, because he left the facility on Wednesday after a dispute with the star quarterback. Didn't come on Thursday. Now, to me, I played 16 years in the league, and I'm talking about, man, I did a lot of stuff. But it was never acceptable for me to miss work or any of my teammates to miss work. Now, a handful of times, there were examples. I'm talking about a handful. And I played with a bunch of rowdy, crazy, I'm talking about guys hung out all night. But there was not one day where it was acceptable for all of us not to be there. I was always taught to either come to work and report in, and I'll decide if we're going to send you home. So these things that Mike Tomlin has allowed to do, and the only reason why they're having that press conference, because the toothpaste got out and we was able to see it. The injury report was false, and we knew, and he knew that ultimately the public was getting ready to know. So he tried to get ahead of this. So Mike Tomlin, and the way he's decided to manage the Pittsburgh Steelers, allows something like this to happen, because as a coach, Dennis Green told me, listen, don't embarrass me. Don't put me in a position, because if you do, I will choose what's best for the team. I will not choose you. So Mike Tomlin, yeah, he's got to be soul searching, because to me, his career is in the balance. What kind of coach is he going to be? And to me, I believe this is going to be a watershed moment as far as how long he's going to be able to stay with the Steelers, or is 2019 that going to be the last year of the Steelers as we know it?
What about Antonio Brown? What do you think the future is within this organization for Antonio Brown?
Well, the future depends on what happens over the next few months. The future depends on Antonio's perspective. Does he come in? Does he have a sit-down with ownership, with Mike Tomlin? Do they get to a point where they actually understand how it got to this point, and being able to sit down at a table and say, okay, this is what happened. Why did it happen? How is it never going to happen again? And there be a real commitment to doing that, and some honesty about how you got there. To me, then he's back. Now, if ownership has reached the point of no return, then it doesn't matter what he says. They're going to push it off.
I remember one time with Randy Moss, him and I had messed up the schedule. We were getting ready to go to a playoff game. Not going to tell you which one. But Moss had messed up the schedule, and I had called him on the phone. He was going to get his haircut, and I was like, bruh, we got a team meeting. He was like, man, I'm already at the barbershop. I'm already downtown. I was like, man, I'm going to the facility. I called Coach Green. Hey, man, Randy's going to be, and we were scrambling because he was going to be 10 or 15 minutes late. I have never been in any type of locker room where a guy wasn't here that we weren't concerned about his well-being, and or we had to find out. So what they're doing in Pittsburgh is stuff that I have never seen in the NFL.
I want to ask you a question, because you said something I've heard a lot of people say this week, which is, and it's similar to one of the things you've said, which is if you're not coaching it, you're allowing it, or am I misquoting that? Along those lines?
If you're not coaching, if you're either teaching it or tolerating it.
Sure, and with Tomlin, you're saying he allowed this situation to come to pass. Once they paid Antonio Brown a second time, he had his rookie deal, got the big extension, they then gave him a second big extension. Where was the point where Mike Tomlin, what could he have done leading up to this? What could he have done? I mean, none of us thought that when Antonio threw the cooler last year, you bench him for a game. We all thought, listen, that's a fiery player, that happens. And and I remember you saying you don't penalize the other 52 guys. Like, you can't take money from him.
That narrative right there, to me, is the problem. That's a fiery player. That happens.
Yeah, you have a video of that the next day, and you show it to the team, and you tell them, I'm not going to allow it. It's not acceptable behavior.
Right,
but you start talking, scouts will do that a lot of time in the meeting room. He's a little bit immature. He's a fiery player. He's competitive. All these euphemisms for this is a disruptive guy that's going to have to, you know, be handled in a different way.
But I mean, practically speaking, because I remember us talking about that the day after and the week after, and nobody thought you bench him. You have limited what you can fine a guy, and especially
what you have to do is, man, you have to be consistent before the team.
Okay.
The rules apply to everyone, and you have to be able to discipline guys, and you have to be able to chastise guys, superstar guys, in front of the other players, because it lets the other players know that we're all on the same footing. Somewhere along the way, Mike Tomlin has allowed the Pittsburgh Steelers, not only AB, Ben Roethlisberger, L. Bell, and a bunch of them. I got stories like Ryan Clark, but I decided not to utilize them the way Ryan used them in saying that they created this monster. Mike Tomlin has been a part of it. If you're the head coach, you should take some of the responsibility.
Can you change that? Can you, as the head coach, can you change the way your players see you if you've been there for so long, doing it one way for so long?
Look, if you're going to benefit from these types of players, then you also got to live with the downside of these types of players. And that's a decision that you make organizationally. That's a decision that you make in the draft room, in free agency, and you can manage it and to some degree on a day-to-day basis. But there's a level of behavior that at some point doesn't make sense, and you bought into it. Right. You bought it.
All right, we got to take a break. Coach, we'll see you a little bit later on in the show. Coming up, is the Bears defense about to bring the Eagles